Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Casino Business Podcast. I call it podcast, but most people actually watch it in video, I think. But I'm here with fellow CEO Juan Romero, CEO of Volante Software. I'm your host, Craig Shacklett, CEO of TRIO360. Juan, how are you, sir?
Doing well, man. How about you? Another week, right? On the grind. It's good
Another
stuff.
week on the grind. Well, and I know you're doing well because we were talking off camera. You just launched your newest module at one of the biggest casinos in the country. You must be on cloud nine right now.
Yeah, so it's actually going live on June 15th or 16th, something like that. But yeah, we're elated, man. It's been a haul. This is a new piece of functionality that we've been working on with them and our other customer base for quite some time. But this particular property in California has an extremely large volume of games, and so it'll be a great test of the product going forward and what we're looking to achieve with it.
It brings up a good question. Anybody that's tuned in, seen our interviews before, basically the format is we're a couple CEOs of growing software companies, and scalability is something that you hope you face, right? If we're doing our job right and growing the business, then scalability is something that we have to think about. And obviously you're launching a new module with a big customer, and I know you've got a lot of interest from other casinos. So how do you think about scaling up your organization?
Yeah, it's kind of that tug of war, right? Where you kind of have two different ends, and you're trying to satisfy both of them, which is one is being able to scale and meet the time obligations, right? To be as quick as we can and nimble on our feet, while at the same time maintaining quality, right? So our product has to be a quality product, it has to be free of bugs and defects, and it has to meet the customer's ultimate requirements. So, it's kind of one of those hand-in-hand type deals that you kind of got to put it right in the middle, because if you stray too far in one direction or another, they have an adverse effect on the other goal. So I think for us really it's about balance, and that's kind of what we're working on right now.
How do you and I'll talk about how kind of we do it, but how do you think about, like, all right, what am I going to prioritize? How do you figure out where the bottleneck is, that, like, all right, we need to solve this issue first to help us scale, and then we'll take care of these other things later?
Yeah, I think the way that we've done it in the past and what we're doing currently, and which has worked really well for us, is kind of break it into multiple phases, if you will, right? So we have what would probably be considered in the startup world an MVP, or your minimum viable product, right? So these are the bare requirements that need to go out in order to solve the need or the issue for the customers. From there, once we define that, we can say, all right, we have a production ready system at this point, with these components. And so really regression testing, speed testing, hitting all those variables, making sure the training is on point. Then from there, we can, identify some short-term add-ons and then long-term add-ons, right? And so potentially we can say we're going to get this out to market and kind of scale as we go and progress through it. And, that's worked really well for us, not only because it allows us to align closer with the customers, but also because we don't develop a bunch of things under assumptions that, once you put something in the real world, may or may not bear out, and then you've either wasted time and money, or, hopefully not both.
For us, we have a good cadence, and we've had it for probably 3 years. There's a book called Traction, and it's a EO operating system.
Okay.
And so we adopted that maybe it's been 4 years by now, and that's a weekly, quarterly, and annual cadence. And to be honest, we haven't been that great about always doing our annual, like, 2-day retreat to plan out the yearly goals and your 5-year goals, and then quarterly, they call them rocks, where it's like, all right, by the end of the quarter, we got to do this. But we have been very good about a weekly cadence, and at the start of every meeting, we look at a set of KPIs, key performance indicators, and with that, that's one way where we track scalability. This is more on the URComped side, which is what Trio grew out of. URComped, for anybody that isn't familiar with our story, URComped is a casino marketing platform. Players sign up, they get qualified for offers, and we send them to casinos around the country, and we're the number one source of casino bookings with pretty much all the major cruise lines. And so that's where Trio spun out of. So on the URComp side, there's kind of the quantitative and the qualitative metrics that we look at, where it's like, how is customer response time? Is that starting to creep up? Like, is our team being slower getting back to players because there's a lot more inbound inquiries? Okay, well then we probably need to hire more people. Are any people on the team starting to seem a little burned out, or conversely, are they, maybe not have enough things to do that we need to give them more tasks, keep them engaged and keep them interested? So on the URComp side, we've got a good system of kind of a quantitative, qualitative look at like, all right, where are we hitting bottlenecks? And that's on the website as well, like where players falling off on the sign up process. So that's been a great machine that created a platform that we're really proud of, TRIO, which is now being used at other casinos. And that's like kind of relearning the wheel for where do we need to scale. And on the product side, it's been, we get feedback from customers, right? Like our use case, there's a ton of overlap, right? It's talking to players, getting them interested, and then getting them booked. And that is something that casinos do. But they use, for example, mobile phone a lot more than we do. Like it's made 80-20 mobile in the casino, and it's flipped on the URComp use case. So there's some things that we learned on that front. For me personally, right now, it's the sales side is what I'm wrestling with scaling up. Because when I know you can identify when you're CEO. We kind of tried having a salesperson, but it's tough. Like I think you really, as the founder, you need to know how to sell it first before you can teach somebody else to sell it. And so get used to, for me, I'm prospecting, and all of a sudden you get a couple clients, and all of a sudden your time gets tied up, and then you're not prospecting anymore, and the pipeline stops growing, and then you kind of get the new clients onboarded, and then your pipeline's dry. So that's really what I've been kind of wrestling with now. Is like we've got product side, I'm confident, we don't have any issues scaling there, but really it's like the sales and marketing organization. How do we grow that part of our business?
Yeah, and that's always a tough one. Do you think, you mentioned a little bit about, long-term planning. Do you think that fits in our world? What's long-term to you?
Yeah, that's funny because it is like in this EOS, and which I think it would apply to big businesses as well, just that cadence. There's a lot of great stuff. But yeah, some of it's like do a 10-year vision, do a 5-year vision. And I mean, that's so pie in the sky with like how quick things shift in our industry and of a business of our size. Cause I know like you with a lot of your modules that are selling like crazy now, you didn't even know you didn't know they'd be there 2 years ago. So how would you know, like, how can you plan for that 5 years? But I think it is good to kind of force yourself to think long term, and you may see bigger opportunities than if you're just doing a week by week cadence. But yeah, 5-year planning is kind of tough. It's like, yeah, I don't know, we'll be $100 million company. Like I have no idea. But it is good just to think like, well, what are some kind of like crazy pie in the sky moonshot things we could do? And then you can think, is that realistic? And like Pitbull says, right? Aim for the stars, you might hit the moon, something like that. I can't remember what it is.
Or aim for the moon. If you miss, you'll land on the star. I don't know, something like that.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, the thing is funny is like people talk about 10-year, 5-year, 3-year plans. Like, to me, a year is a long time, right? So we've gone through those exercises of talking a lot about where we feel we're going to be, both from a product and an organizational standpoint over X amount of years. And as I compile those and look at them, I'm like, I mean, I guess it's good reference for, kind of a direction, maybe like a compass, if you will, as to what direction we feel like we need to head in. And it's certainly applicable, but most of that stuff I just write down, I think it's like I write a piece of paper and basically take a lighter and burn it, because a week later we're doing something, that I guess loosely fits into that umbrella. But, I've always kind of struggled with that because I came from a corporate background where, planning and long-term planning and short-term planning were like key to everything we did. And now, I kind of see, I mean, there's some good to that, but I think that a lot of time, if you're too busy talking about what you're going to do, you're not always doing what you should be doing. And so now we're trying to just take much smaller chunks and achieve those things that will granularly lead to something much larger.
How do you think about risk in scaling? Because like, I would say I'm on the business side, I would say I'm a little on the risk averse side, where an example would be like, well, why don't you hire two people, hire two salespeople, and just trust that they're going to grow the pipeline enough to justify the cost. And I'm more like, I need to, like, I always like being profitable. And if we're going to make a hiring decision that is going to make us unprofitable for a time being, I need to like be 99% certain that it's going to pay for itself and we're going to be back in the black in a short period of time. Whereas there's other entrepreneurs that are like pedal to the metal. They're just trusting that drawbridge is going to come down just in time as they're hitting it. And if not, then I guess they're just confident that they'll raise more money, or I don't know. But like my mindset, I tend maybe to a fault sometimes, but I'm definitely more of the listen. I want to make sure our business is secure. I don't want to take on too much risk. Maybe it's hurting my growth to a certain extent, but like I just don't want to burn the house down trying to trying to do something too aggressive. How would you frame yourself on that scale?
Well, I think it's calculated risk, right? So for us, I mean, obviously risk is a large part of what we're doing, or else we wouldn't be here. We would be working for someone else, right? But what's interesting is I don't do anything without a spreadsheet. I got spreadsheets for years, and so we have all this analysis going on constantly about what the return is going to be and what the potential sales and ramifications of the decisions may be. I think in your case, having been through where you were, particularly on the sales and marketing side, it is a lot harder to commit the money and make that leap when you don't have the system fleshed out the way you'd like to, right? So at this point, I'm much more confident in that marketing, in that sales spend than I was 3 years ago, right? Because to your point, like, how is someone else supposed to do this until I know how we should proceed and what the journey of a customer is, from the first time they hear about us, through our first contact, through our first demo, through contracts, through go live, through post go live support. So once that was all laid out, I mean, then it just becomes a numbers thing to me, right? It's like, all right, we can generate this much revenue, assuming these following things. Now we got to jump, right? So I think that, you might call yourself risk adverse. I think for where you're at in the stages of things, I was and I would have been like that too, is really just trying to get your feet underneath you before you commit a bunch of capital to something. And I think that, for us, that's what's right. I mean, everyone has their own path, but I think that's the way that you last, because, things ebb and flow, and we've been up and we've been down and we've been everywhere in between. And you got to kind of ride the middle, long enough to make the journey as long as possible in order to capitalize on the next, trajectory up. And so, that's kind of that's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's because again, going back to the URComped side, it's different with B2C, business to consumer, versus software where it's B2B, the software we sell. And because on the URComped side, it's like now, like you said, there's an equation. It's like, all right, every $1,000 we put into Facebook ads, we know how many signups we're going to get. We know how many of those signups are going to take a trip, and how many of those people that take a first trip are going to take a repeat trip, and at which point we break even. And then it's just like, it's a math equation. It's like, of course we're going to put more money into it. And then on the B2B side, it's just the numbers are so much smaller. Instead of it being a million potential gamblers, right, that could be a fit for URComped, you're dealing with, I don't know, 1,500 casinos and the executives that run there. So it's just a smaller universe. And it's, I mean, I know there's an equation for it. It's just a matter of like how, just kind of fumbling around, trying new things until it's like, oh, that worked again. Okay, oh, it worked the third time. All right, now we got something that we can start building the spreadsheet based on. Is that kind of how you figured out your sales model, where now you feel like you got something that's more repeatable?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a much better sense of the steps and the timeframes that are associated with what we're trying to do. And as we've cultivated our story, by putting our product out in the world and having people use it, it certainly shrank the amount of time for that sales cycle to turn. And it was funny because when we set out, like on the implementation side, it was like 90 days. We should figure out how we can do this in 90 days. by our second or third implementation from that period, we were down to 60 and then 30. And then, at this point, it really is just how fast can the clients turn around their data as to how fast we can get up and running. And so, I think it's just, it took some time and some getting used to on both ends of that. And it's one of those things, especially on the sales and marketing side, is you have to approach it with real world experience. There really isn't a substitute for that. And I don't think there's a lot of, derivatives that we can pull from other industries that are going to give you a really clear and concise picture of what to expect. The only way you can do that is getting out and talking to as many people as you can, and entering into as many, potentially good deals as you can, right? So one of the things that has frustrated some of the sales executives that I've worked with in the past is that this isn't about volume to me, right? Like, I don't care if I get 100 accounts if I'm losing like 5 or 6 every year because the product is suffering, or the quality of the product, the quality of the service, the implementation times go. I don't want none of that. I mean, this just as well as I do, is gaming is such a small network that if you burn one bridge, you're not burning one, you might be burning 10 or 12, right? And to your point, when you're bringing in people that represent your company, whether it's salespeople or account executives, it's hard to let go, because we know that if you screw up one thing, a lot of people go, well, I need to do this and I may fall on my face, but I need that to learn. Well, in our industry, that's different. If you fall on your face, you're probably not going to get another shot at it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, do everything you can on the front end to be prepared. And does that, are we expecting perfection? Absolutely not. But the key is you only get one shot. You're not going to get 5. And I know that because I've been through it. I've lost accounts where I didn't get something done when I said I was going to do it, and now they still won't call me, right? I didn't install, it didn't go sideways, they didn't put their name on anything, but just that one interaction of failing to do what we said we were going to do resulted in a lost opportunity.
The learning experience, like, sometimes you have to learn it by failing. It's like a kid, like, don't touch it, it's hot. Don't touch it, it's hot. And then they touch it and it's hot, and then they won't touch it anymore. But right. It's because I've definitely learned in all aspects of business from just mistakes that probably I read about it in a book, or I heard some speakers say, don't do this. But it wasn't until I screwed something up and then it hurt. Then it's like, oh, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah. And don't you think that that directly correlates with scale and what your methodology and approach is to it as a business owner, is how much of that unknown risk of maintaining quality versus that acceleration of growth, and how do you keep those two things as closely tied together as you possibly can? And so in your experience, when you were scaling the URComped side, which again is B2C, so it is a little bit different, but when you were scaling that, what hurdles did you have when you went out to market with those two lines potentially converge or diverging, or have they always ran pretty parallel to each other?
Are you talking about like
in terms of quality, and as you gained a bunch of users, did you see a drop off in your ability to service them, or have you guys been able to keep it pretty close to that, and as a result, not only keep those people but keep satisfaction high?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We did have to, at a certain point, make a split between like the level of player, because I want to give great service to everybody that interacts with us, and I want that to be our brand. Customer service, like great interaction, friendly, but at a certain point, we were getting so many signups, and that our team, we couldn't give great service to everybody, and so we had to make the decision. All right, well, players below this level, we're just going to have to make it through the website, essentially, or do a better job of kind of filtering them ahead of time, let them know, hey, listen, there's not many offers for you. And it's still it's a tough thing that we still wrestle with. We've gotten a lot better at it, but there was a period where it was kind of painful, where it's just people were starting to get pissed, and it went from, oh, you guys used to give such good service, now we don't. And it was something we wrestled with. But at a certain point, it's listen, as much as we want to serve everyone, there's this big chunk of people that just are not profitable. And as much as we want to love them, if we're going to survive as a business, we're going to have to just do something. Like, because we can't hire more people because to support these people that aren't making us money. So we just did some things on the website in the sign up process where it's like, if players don't meet a certain criteria, there may be a couple offers that they could book without having to talk to somebody, but it's really like, it's the upper echelon of players that get that kind of handheld service. So,
Okay. And so
yeah.
basically you qualified your customers at that point, right? To a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That was it. We got a lot more deliberate about like qualifying customers and yeah, just kind of figuring out like, all right, if we either like give everybody a 3 of a service, or we figure out like how can we give these people a 10 and just be comfortable with, you know, losing other players. Now, we still are able to service through our, you know, through the technology we have, like way more players than a team of like 5 or 6 hosts can.
Sure.
But yeah, there's just some players that you know, they don't really qualify for free cruises. Like that was really the threshold. It's like we saw the conversion rate for players that qualified for a free cruise was very high. On the other end, where they don't quite qualify for a free cruise, it was like, well, how much does this cruise cost? It's too expensive. What about this cruise? It's still too expensive. So it was like that kind of break between
Sure.
players that would qualify for at least a handful of free cruises versus players that didn't. Those ones just seemed to ask for more things,
Mm-hmm.
like, and they weren't generating as much revenue versus players that were easier to book and generated more revenue. So like when I talked about it, probably for you, it's like, seems like an easy decision, but still, when for us, it was like, you know, we knew we had to rip off the Band-Aid. It was still kind of painful, but you know, looking back, I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I don't think it's an easy thing at all. I mean, those people help form the base of your company at one time, and certainly if you want to, you know, as much as we can accommodate and provide for people, we want to do that. So I think that's good business, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to do outside of the numbers, right? So we always look at the numbers to see what direction we should head in, but you don't always take those things at black and white face value, because I feel like, you know, there's levels of gray, and I think that's one of them for sure.
Well, and the other thing too is like a lot of our growth came from social media, and that's something you need to weigh too, because you need to handle it with kid gloves, where I always forget, is it kid gloves or kit gloves? But whatever, you get what I'm saying, where it's like when you're saying, hey, we're not maybe going to be able to help you too much, you don't want all of a sudden a bunch of 1-star reviews on
Right.
Facebook or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, your page gets damaged. So that was something we had to walk to, like even after we made a certain decision, it's like, all right, well, how do we make this transition without, you know, thousands of players just getting all pissed and like tearing down our Facebook rating. So
Well, that's the same conversation that operations have all the time, right? I mean, every marketing meeting I've ever been in is what player segment is generating the most revenue, and volume on the floor doesn't necessarily translate to the bottom line, and it actually pushes the service costs way up. So would I rather have 500 of my top players on the floor, or 2,000 where there's, you know, 5 buckets and the people, because at that point you're probably displacing my VIP people if they can't play their favorite machines, if they're not getting the service they're used to. And it's that whole 80-20 rule that everyone's always talking about, right? And so I think it's the same, it's basically the same dilemma, just, you know, from a service standpoint as opposed to operations.
do you do that with your prospect list, with, or, you know, when you and your team are going out to market, do you have, all right, these are like slam dunk, we got to hit these casinos, and then move down the list?
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of people are surprised that we don't have very many properties in New Mexico. We only have one. And when people in New Mexico hear that, they're like, well, how come you're not in these properties, right? And they're the big properties for New Mexico, but they're a third of the size of our next customer up. And so what we really learned was, based on our price point, and you know, the price point is definitely a part of it, but also, you know, and this doesn't run hand in hand with everyone, but a lot of obviously the higher end properties have more, or higher volume properties, I should say, not higher end, higher volume properties have more employees, more capital, you know, more investment. A lot of them are in very highly competitive markets. And so their mindset is that of like, how do we grow? How do we grow? How do we grow? How do we beat the guy next down the street? Like that's 24/7 for them, you know. And whereas in other markets that we go and maybe they have between 600 and 1,500 games, and they're fighting a little bit within their market for market share, but they're pretty comfortable with their customer, with their processes, with their employees and their interactions and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, I always tell salespeople, if we have to convince somebody to use our product, we're talking to the wrong people. And internally, I think we have that line fleshed out pretty decently in terms of the type of organizations that are going to be more, you know, open to working with us and our product. But, you know, there's outliers everywhere, you know, so we will never not talk to somebody. I mean, we love to show people what we do, whether it results in a sale or a conversation or even you should check this out, or maybe you should try that. It's every single one of those conversations is invaluable to us, but we definitely know where kind of our time should be spent, you know, in terms of reaching out proactively to properties.
If a company or property wants to reach out to you, they watch this conversation, they're fired up about all these big casinos that want a piece of Volante software and all these hot new modules, how should they get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of us through the website, volantesoftware.com, or my LinkedIn, like always. Yeah, we're easy to find. Volante Software on LinkedIn, volantesoftware.com, and we'll be at NIGA. We're going to go visit you and hopefully see everyone we haven't seen in a long time. It's about that time.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I can't wait. That's going to be a ton of fun. We got a great booth set up. We just had a meeting yesterday about what's going to be going on there, so stay tuned for that. If anybody wants to see TRIO360, we've got a website. We have the .vip at the end because TRIO360 helps casinos deal. Yeah, helps get more money from their VIPs. So TRIO360.vip. You connect with me on LinkedIn, Craig Shacklett. Juan, thank you as always, sir.
It's always a pleasure, man. It's always good to talk. You know, it's funny because we already had all these conversations. Now we're just taping them. It's kind of nice.
I know. No, I like it. It's there's a guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, who I haven't listened to in a while, but he's always like, document.
The wine guy?
What's that?
The wine guy?
Yeah, wine guy. But he's like, just record everything. Then you don't have to worry about creating new content because, yeah, as we were talking, we're you know, anybody that's listening sees just a couple, you know, startup CEOs like coming up with ideas, bouncing ideas off each other. It's like, man, this is good content. Might as well record it, put it out.
Well, until next time, my friend, thank you for everything.
Thank you, sir.